Shwmae, and welcome to the first session of the AS Geography sessions of Spring 2024. My name is Mr. Miles Herman, and I'll be running these sessions in this spring period. There'll be three geography AS sessions. The first one will be on changing places, which is in the Unit 2 exam. The second one will be on glaciated landscapes, which is based on the Unit 1 exam. And the third one will be a recap going over exam technique and exam questions, and with a focus on the fieldwork study that is in the Unit 2 examination. So let's get started. Today's content will be based on the three and an overview of the first, the third three units or questions that we need to know for the examination. There are 10 key questions that we need to know for this examination in the Unit 2 changing places unit. Similarly to the changing the glaciated landscapes or the coastal landscapes unit, there's 10 key questions. This examination is worth 16% of the entire A-level geography and is 16%, as I said. It's 64 marks, and 32 of those marks are based on this examination. Now, if you're wondering why I haven't started with 2.1.1 and 2.1.2, that is because there is already a session online on e-sgol from another geography speaker that has already spoken and delivered a session on the first two key questions. So I'm following on that work and developing on it, giving you just an overview of 2.1.3 to 2.1.5. Now, obviously, the case studies that I'll be showing might be completely different to your class notes, and the examples and any possible exam questions might be something completely new to you. But the idea is to give you an overview, as I said, and to just recap some of the content that you've possibly studied in these three key questions. So to start off, we're going to look at 2.1.3, which is changes over time in economic characteristics of places. Now, the first thing we need to know in this unit is the different types of sectors of employment. There are four sectors of employment, the first being primary, which is fishing, agriculture, mining. Secondary being industry, that could be iron, steelworks, creating clothes. Thirdly, then the tertiary sector, which is service-based, for example, working in a shop, office, education, the police. And then the new one that is emerging, which is the quaternary sector, which is advanced technology, advanced knowledge, the creative industries. And I've put an example there of a scientific researcher. Now then, we need to also know about this model when speaking about economic characteristics over time. This is called the Clark-Fisher model, and it shows a general pattern of how economic characteristics of places have changed over time. There are three stages of the model: pre-industrial, industrial, and post-industrial, and all display how the four sectors have changed over time. We can see from the model that the primary and secondary sector are growing, and it is heavily based on the primary sector in the pre-industrial. But the primary sector is actually declining slightly because the secondary sector is developing. In the industrial stage of the model, we can see that the tertiary sector is starting to emerge, and the secondary sector is still increasing quite rapidly, and then sort of matures in the middle. And we can see a slight decline then in the primary sector. Post-industrial, we can see a decline of the primary sector heavily here. We can see the rise of the tertiary sector, declining secondary sector, but we do start to see this new sector emerge, the quaternary sector. It's important to note this model isn't, however, applicable to all countries around the world. Now, in the AS Geography examination, we will need to be aware of how we word different countries and categorize different countries. We don't call them poor countries or rich countries. We call them low-income countries, LIC, middle-income countries, MIC, and high-income countries, MIC. Again, this is putting a sort of term upon this country, whether they are low, middle, or high. However, it is better than calling them a poor or a rich country. Now, let's start off with looking at some examples and maybe thinking, is the Clark-Fisher model applicable to this possible type of country? So the primary sector in Ethiopia, for example, is the largest and main sector, where 75% of people work in the sector. And this is mainly based in agriculture and subsistence farming, where they're farming purely to give food to their family. The hours that they work are often long, harsh conditions possibly, and a little commercial farming is done. This might be done in sort of coffee growing, and they do export this crop. Secondary sector is quite small. It's mainly men that work in the factories, and they again receive little pay, and there's very little good working conditions there. Foreign investment, however, has been boosted, and there are some jobs starting to emerge in textile and leather factories, for example. And the tertiary sector accounts for around 15% and is developing, and this is mainly based in tourism. Middle income countries, however, for example, China, again, we're seeing the primary sector is the largest in China. But differently to Ethiopia, we are seeing this through mining instead of agriculture, and it's men that mainly coal mine here, and again working conditions are poor, mining accidents are quite frequent, and differently we see the women are in the agricultural sector. The secondary sector in China then is not as big as the primary sector, however produces a lot more money and towards the Chinese economy. Again, men and women both work in this sector, and the goods from the manufacturing industry are found all over the world. The hours are long and the working conditions are poor, but the pay is better than agriculture. Tertiary sector is about as big as the primary sector. However, people in the sector and the secondary sector earn more money and can spend in leisure and services. Working hours are long here, and the working conditions are much safer than found in the secondary sector. Now, high-income countries, such as the United Kingdom, the primary sector only actually accounts currently for 2% of the employment structure of the country. There's little fishing or mining, and this is mainly or agriculture, and this is declined over the years. Due to poor government funding. And in terms of farming and agriculture, this is due to mechanization, which means the use of robotics and machinery, which means that the workforce that there was once on farms has significantly reduced. Farming, the secondary sector then is only around 18%, and this is due to deindustrialization that's happened in the United Kingdom and the relocation of traditional industries. This is mainly based because of globalization, whereby transnational companies have decided to redistribute parts of their companies where they can exploit workers in middle income and low income countries to receive more profit. However, in the UK, there are some factories that still do exist. These are high tech, quite automated, and the workforce then is significantly reduced compared to what it is possibly in middle income and low income countries. The tertiary sector dominates in the UK. 2 million people are actually self-employed. They can work from home. They rely on telephones, the internet for this. Technology has benefited many people that live in rural areas to mean that they can have access to tertiary sector jobs instead of farming of what it once was. And the working conditions in the UK are quite high standard. There's strict safety regulations and trade unions that represent and look after workers. We also have minimum wages and equal opportunities to ensure there's no discrimination in terms of gender, race, age, and so forth. Now, why has there been a decline in the primary sector? Well, 150,000 farmers have left the industry. From 1939, the 4.5% of workers were farmers, and in 2000, 1.3% of workers were farmers. Farmers are restricted on how many sheep they can have, which then led to less money being produced and then subsequently less jobs. And mechanization has had the largest contributing factor to agriculture. So new machinery, as I said before, has meant that jobs on farms have decreased. There's not a need for them because a machine can do maybe the job of 20 people. In the secondary sector, as I said, we are now post-industrial in the United Kingdom. We have seen a decline in the secondary sector. In 1960, 40% of the whole economic output was manufacturing, and this employed 1/3 of the whole workforce. And today, 11% of the economy is based up, well, 11% of the economy output is based from manufacturing and less than 10% of the workforce. This has obviously changed significantly, and this is mainly due to globalization. Low-income countries, middle-income countries can offer cheaper land, they can offer less strict regulations, working conditions, which means people can work for longer hours, and obviously due to globalization and technologies, different countries can communicate better, meaning that they can have a sort of international supply chain over the world. Also, in the United Kingdom in the 80s, there was less financial support and investment, and there was a focus on high-tech industry, and this also contributed to the decline in the secondary sector and the manufacturing sector. This is an exam question. Unfortunately, it is in Welsh, but I can translate it for you. However, what it shows here is primary, secondary, and tertiary sector over time, and it's asking us to use figure 2 to analyze the changes over time to the employment structure that we can see. So to analyze, that is an AO3, as we can see here, Amcanasesi tree, which means that we purely just use the data and analyze what we can see. So describe what we can see. Now, in the AS and A-level examinations, the markers will mark based on the 3 assessment objectives. The first assessment objective is based on the AO1, is based on geographical knowledge and understanding. So that's case studies that you've learnt, geographical information, concepts, your understanding of geography. AO2 then is that you've interpreted something. So, for example, if this was going to ask us to suggest reasons for the changing structure of employment over time, that's when we'd have to use that to interpret and suggest reasons why there would be changes over time. And then, as we can see here, assessment objective 3 is purely based on analysing data, maps, maybe to do show workings out, possibly, for numerical work. But here we would purely have to analyse the changes. So in order to gain the 5 marks here, we would need to use all the data shown, so from 1900, 1926, 1966 and 2016, and speak about the primary, secondary, tertiary and quaternary sectors. So I would pick up on things like this to maybe show that the largest increase and over time is in the tertiary and the quaternary sector. So you could say in 1900, and you could work out using your ruler. You could see exactly what the tertiary sector it was in 1900, and you could change and you could compare that to 2016. Similarly, then, you can look at the primary sector in 1900s and how it's significantly, again, decreased into 2016. Again, the secondary sector has also seen a decrease over time. You would need to speak about each for year and every category here in order to gain the 5 marks. That's what the is in the examining information here in the marking scheme. If you'd like to try this at home, you can give this a go. So what is the value of the Clark-Fisher model? Well, it doesn't represent every country in the world. It just gives you an idea of some of the post-industrial countries and how their employment structure looks. Obviously, this would not be applicable to Ethiopia, as they are still in their pre-industrial stage. However, you would assume, because they have had tertiary sector growth, that theirs is not going to follow the same trends we can see here. I've put some more information on the side here that assesses the value of this model and how it can be of use, but also is quite negative. Here's a model answer for a question that you could receive that says, explain the reasons for the decline in the primary sector in the UK. So this pupil from my school has written this answer. One reason for the reduction in the primary sector is the development of coal, because imports are cheaper, which means less demand and fewer jobs. In addition, Margaret Thatcher closed the coal mines, for example, Big Pit in South East Wales in the 80s. This led to a decline in the sector. Another reason for this is mechanisation, because new engineering in agriculture can do the job of 20 people, so there is less jobs, and this leads to a reduction in the sector. In addition, I believe that the social changes in education play a huge role in the reduction due to an increase in tertiary jobs as a result of university being pushed on more young people. There were 757 undergrad applications in 2023 in the UK. This means that there are fewer workers in the sector and therefore led to less leading and the reduction of the sector. So what we can see here is good geographical knowledge. They have displayed different reasons due to the decline in the primary sector. We can see them quite clearly here. We can see examples such as the government schemes, such as the Thatcher governments, the Conservative government, and different areas that were affected as a result. There's statistics running through this answer as well. So this answer would have to receive the top band for this. Next then, we'll be looking at 2.1.4, which looks at deindustrialized areas and the inequalities that we can see over time. Now, I am aware there's a lot of information in this slide. You might not even do this case study in your school. However, this is just an example that you can use for the examination, because it is required that you do need to know one area that has seen deindustrialization. So Cardiff Bay and Tiger Bay, as it was once known, and that name is now brought back into Cardiff, is an area that was industrial. This was mainly due to the valleys sending coal to the docks. The docks had developed then over time, and it became one of the largest ports for exporting coal in the whole world. Now, this made a significant amount of money. It says here, in the coal exchange building was the world's first 1 million check signed the sale of coal. However, things started to change after World War II. The demand for coal from foreign countries for the export from Cardiff, that fell. The steel industries also fell in the area, and by 1960, coal exports had almost completely ceased. Around 10,000 jobs were lost throughout this period, and 3,200 were the Eastmoor Steelworks that was closed in 1978. By the 80s then, Cardiff Bay then became quite neglected, a wasteland area, disused docks. There was social exclusion, higher than average levels of unemployment, and much of the population then had left, and well, there was no money, there was no employment in the area, so the sense of community completely disappeared. Dereliction was evident then, buildings became left empty, and the goal then was to reinvest in the area. The 60s then saw large parts of the bay and the community shattered and replaced, and some were given second homes if they were lucky in other places. So when looking at decline, there is actually this circle of deprivation that we can look at. And you can talk about the circle of deprivation if you were to talk about your case study in the exam. So here we can see in the circle of deprivation, there's poverty and lack of income. That leads to poor living conditions. This might have a strain on health. This might lead to then possible poor education and the lack of funding in education and schools. And this will lead subsequently to a lack of skills, meaning then there'll be more poverty in the future generations. Now, as you can see to the side here, there are some reasons as to what happened to the decline and the effects to the area. So as I said before, original community had been completely shattered, homes had been demolished because they wanted to redevelop the area, and residents weren't really lucky enough to decide whether they could all be relocated together, and some were rented properties, so they just had to leave the area, and life was made a lot harder for them. 5,780 new homes were built on the Cardiff Bay site. However, these just weren't affordable for the original residents, and people that had lost jobs in their heavy industries. The sort of new jobs that they had were low income and maybe part-time, temporary work, and the price of a two-bedroom flat was over £100,000. 20% of the new houses were to be affordable for the local residents, but this was not sufficient considering how many people had lost their original homes and were out of work as well, or out of the professional work. The local residents felt that the area was no longer for them. It was the professional people that they wanted, not for the original residents of Tiger Bay. Again, there wasn't enough investment in training of workers who lost their jobs on different schemes, and there were no access to local people to the professional jobs, because they didn't have the qualifications, and that again makes a link to the lack of skills and poor education in the circle of deprivation here. So you could receive an exam question on this. Examine the consequences of the loss of the traditional and secondary industries in urban areas that you've studied. Now, with this question, is asking us two things to examine, which is assessment objective 2, and is also asking us to use assessment objective 1 to give the information, geographic information we know on the consequences of the one area, the urban area that we've studied. So in order to gain the explore or the examine assessment objective 2, we need to say if they're good or they're bad implications or consequences. Are they mostly good, mostly bad? And then for the assessment objective 1, we need to discuss the results in detail, the consequences in detail, and we need to use connectives as well. So here's one model answer. I'm going to move myself there so I can read this to you. So the area I have studied is Cardiff Bay. There is no doubt that there are negative social effects of deindustrialisation. For example, and there's a mistake there, sorry, the cycle of deprivation. As a result, 3,200 people lost their jobs at e-sgol steelworks in 1978. Unemployment increased, and so poverty. Also, high levels of poverty mean that living conditions had worsened. We see this in Butetown in 1969, where rubble had been left on Patrick Street after houses had been demolished. This emphasises that the loss of industries has been bad, mainly because Cardiff Bay used to be the coal export centre in the 70s, and therefore, as the demand of coal decreased after the Second World War, levels of deprivation in Cardiff Bay had increased from 13.4% to 23.3% within 2 years. Additionally, the levels of unemployment led to an increase in crime and gambling, with pockets of red light districts growing. This suggests that deindustrialisation is bad mainly because the people needed to resort to breaking the law. In addition to this, many of the residents moved to suburbs because there were no job opportunities for them, and therefore the area was losing more workers. There's no doubt that the loss of the industries was mainly bad because it led to high levels of deprivation and further decline. So I would have scored this answer a 7 out of 8, because there was no mention of maybe the original houses and what had happened to them. You could have spoken about the flats that they developed and the people couldn't afford to live in these new houses. What about a lack of suitable skills for different jobs? And you could talk about the new jobs that the people received. They were mainly part-time workers, low income, and again, this had an implication on the cycle of deprivation. So in order to sort of grapple with the issues, the Welsh Government then placed a lot of investment into enterprise policies. So the enterprise policies looked at 7 different areas of Wales, across Wales, and developing business districts where they could funnel investments, and these were given the areas were given different project ideas. For example, in Ynys Môn, in particular, they looked at energy and sustainable energy. In Cardiff, then, it was mainly based on the financial sector. For example, then, let's look at the enterprise area in Cardiff. Well, this has got good transport links. We've got the airport, which is easy to travel to different countries or areas around the UK. We've got the M4, access to locations, for example, London, Bristol, Oxford on Cardiff's doorstep. We've got the train station. We can rapid transport from the city centre, different areas of Cardiff, and also for people that are commuting. We've got a variety of buses that can travel to and around the city and different areas and affordable price. One example of a company that's set up in this sort of financial sector was Admiral, which is insurance based, and they employ 5,000 staff, and there's a 1.58 billion turnover. Advantages then of this, well, it's allowed for economic growth. It's strengthened the relationship between the Welsh Government and local businesses. It's obviously given employment to a lot of people in an area that there was a lot of unemployment. Based on giving access to markets in order to develop foreign investment relationships. It's more attractive atmosphere for transnational companies and larger companies, foreign investment, like I said, and it's a home now to large companies such as Aston Martin, Tata, and the BBC. So now we're going to look at 2.1.5, which is looking at the tertiary sector and its impacts. So Street Fawr, the High Street, and the CBD, Central Business District. So why did the businesses locate initially in the Central Business District? Well, obviously, agglomeration and proximity. So the main benefits of the city centre location or the town location, the CBD, is mainly infrastructure, so roads and railway all connected to the city. The urban area has a great pool of workers and the employers can tap straight into. The centre is also an area of ideas, information that can be exchanged and sold. This is where finance happens, legal work happens, marketing, businesses, and this all happens in the centre. It's obviously accessible, as I said, and this is where customers go to businesses and where business happens. The largest concentration of shops is usually in the CBD, and that's advantageous for customers, and they compare prices of goods and services within this area. It's also very accessible in terms of transport links that you can go to and from via possible public transport to different cities, different towns, different areas. And also you've got a skilled workforce in this central business district that with mainly high skills that want to earn a good wage. Gentrification is one implication of these sort of social changes in the tertiary sector. So sort of areas of Georgian or Victorian homes that were once deprived are now becoming an area for young middle-class families, couples to take advantage of the sort of inner city life. This is now becoming one of the most expensive and fashionable areas to live in, and we are going to look at, in particular, Brixton in London. So typically houses that used to be cheap, the sort of lower income families rented for a reasonable price are now being sold to investors. These investors are sort of redeveloping them, and gentrification is now taking place. Those original communities are being displaced now because they can't actually afford to rent in the areas in which they had once lived, and they're moving to cheaper areas, and this is called decanting. A small number of people on low incomes can stay in gentrified neighbourhoods if the local government can actually give rent social housing, sort of council housing to them. However, it is unlikely that that can actually happen. So, for example, in Brixton then, in 2021, the average house price was £800,000. 6,400 people in Brixton are unemployed. 40% of those are BAME, and Black, Asian and Asian minority community, ethnic minorities. They're feeling like they're being pushed out of their areas such as Brixton and left in deprivation. Another social change because of the tertiary sector are retail parks. So we're going to be looking now at sort of retail and shopping, and retail parks has affected the central business district, inner city centres, such as the areas that are being gentrified, and also the central business districts. So a number of retail parks, shopping centres were opened outside towns, cities across Wales. So, for example, in Llanelli, Parc Trostre, for example, is going to have an effect on Llanelli town centre. Where I work in Newport, Cribs, there's Spitty retail park, and then, for example, then in Bristol they have Cribs Causeway. Now these contain chain stores, M&S, Next, H&M, Tesco, and these have attracted lots of people and lots of shoppers and lots of customers. And there's lots of advantages to these retail parks because they can offer larger sites, bigger shops. There's more variety of shops. There's free or plenty of parking. It's very accessible, as you can see here in this diagram, and they're usually very accessible. They're close to or adjacent to a motorway or a main road, and this is good for customers to access. They're usually close to suburban housing estates. This provides workers, creates jobs, and also gives them a pool of customers as well. An enjoyable environment it gives them is usually in some green space or open ground, plenty of space for them to roam and walk, and the rents are usually cheaper than in the inner city centre or town centre. This is mainly due to the cheaper land prices, so they can actually have more floor space and display more stock. So, for example, you could get a question like this. Suggest reasons for the growth of retail parks. Use evidence from the map. So you could get something like this, maybe obviously a better map than this. This is just an example that I've used, and things that you could talk about to suggest here. So that's the assessment objective 2. You could talk about, is a brownfield site that they usually developed on. So derelict land that had been developed, which is quite positive, and that's now given plenty of space for this retail park to develop. So lots of people will want to go because there's lots of shops here, because there's lots of space. It's accessible to roads. Here we can see Spitty Retail Park in Newport, where it's close to the A48, and we've got connections to the M4 just to the north. Proximity to the housing estates we can see here. Maybe you could name some using evidence from the map, and the affluence of customers. There's a pool of possible workers. Variety of shops that can be seen here due to plenty of space. People can go to the supermarket possibly also that might be on these larger retail parks, and there's chain stores that do attract more customers. Now we're going to also look at online shopping, because online shopping has also impacted the tertiary sector and city centres, cities and towns. So let's look at the advantages and disadvantages. So, well, online shopping is convenient. You can do one-click shopping like you can on Amazon. There's a greater choice and variety of products online. You can have same day or within the day delivery like I can here living in the city. Disadvantages, not getting your item on the day. So if you were to go to the shop, you could actually get that item on the day. You're not actually visiting or supporting the high street and supporting people's jobs. More likely to support large transnational companies and businesses as opposed to local independent businesses. The product online might not be as you expected. That's probably happened to some of you, where you've received a product and it's not exactly what you anticipated or what you thought it was going to be. And then a decline of the high street. There's fewer visitors on the high street, and this is leading to deprivation of the high street. So I put to the side here, what about the effect of the quality of the central business district and the high street? So that's something really you can debate in an exam question. How does online shopping and the shift in patterns of retail affect inner city centres? Now, here's a model answer of a question that you could get in the examination. So I put here, explore the effects of changes in retail patterns on people's lives. Now, this could exactly be examine. So again, it's an 8-mark question. It's asking us to do 2 things. The assessment objective 2 here is to explore. So you're exploring using causes, effects, and results. You are also here going to use your assessment objective 1, your geography information and understanding on retail patterns on people's lives. So you need to be speaking here about the retail sort of changes, so the CBD and the high street. You would want to be talking about retail parks and online shopping and what's happened as a result of these shifts and of patterns. So here's a model answer for you to look at, and I'll read it out now. One effect of the movement of people towards retail can have on the internet is that more and more businesses will close in the CBD. According to The Guardian, in 2018, 6,000 shops closed on the high streets of the UK in 2017, therefore causing the number of shop workers to decrease, so more people will be out of a job. So it will lead to unemployment and increase in the demand about work and poverty in these areas. According to one article, 11 stores opened on average each year compared to 11 stores closing on average each year. So there'll be fewer places for people to go shopping, and this leads to more people choosing to shop online because there's a wide selection of goods and shopping can be done anywhere from the house conveniently without borders. Another effect is that there will be less chances for people to socialise and develop social skills and meet new people. This is a result of the reduction in shopping in person. For example, spending on fashion and shoes fell by 2% in the last 2 years, according to data from Kantar. This change can also increase jobs in the driving sectors as people buy online to pay for a class of product, which can lead to a negative environmental impact from congestion. So I think about maybe a 6 out of 8 on this answer. Positives, that it does show good geographic understanding to the changes in patterns on people's lives. It's talking mainly about online shopping, and it uses statistics quite carefully in the effects as a result. However, it doesn't look at impact on any places. Well, on what places? What about retail parks? There's nothing on retail parks here. And what are the advantages of retail parks over the central business district? And how has that affected how people now shop? Again, the central business district, and what does that now look like as a result? You could talk about the cycle of deprivation here if you happen. And also what stores maybe have closed and moved online. That would be quite interesting to have a look at some that have moved mainly and solely online as a result of these patterns. So thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn for everybody coming in and joining on the session today. Hopefully it's been of some use. Again, I've just given an overview of those 3 key questions of changing places. Again, this is on the Unit 2 exam, 16% of the grade. The next session I'll be running is on glaciated landscapes. Now, glaciated landscapes is an optional. You either do coastal landscapes or glaciated landscapes. I'll be running a session on glaciated landscapes. The coastal landscapes already exists on the e-sgol website. Again, as I mentioned, 2.1.1 of the changing places, 2.1.2 is already on the e-sgol website. The third session then will be on fieldwork studies, because you'll have to write about that in the Unit 2 exam. And also we'll recap and look at some more exam technique. If you'd like to ask me any questions about anything that's come up in the session today, please don't hesitate to send me an email and I'll be more than happy to respond. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much.